All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Industry Corner Live with IEEE Pulse. My name is Chad Andresen. And today I have with me SomnAir CEO, Anders Sedaris. And he is joining us on a topic of sleep in our issue today. And I'm excited to discuss that with you. Anders, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Very pleased to be here.
Yes, you have an amazing background, and I'm really excited to discuss everything you've been up to. But let's start with being a doctor and how you got to where you're at with SomnAir.
Sure, yeah, happy to go through that. So yeah, my name's Anders. My background, as Chad's mentioned, is I'm a medical doctor. I'm originally from Australia. I finished medical school in 2015, and then worked in the healthcare system in Sydney and the surrounds for a period of about 8 years. During that time, I developed an interest in ear, nose, and throat surgery. So I did training in that field, and in particular had a specific clinical and academic interest in sleep. Sleep on the ENT side is a growing field. It is something that there is a big need around, and I sort of saw that firsthand in my clinical practice, in particular, as I was being mentored by a very prominent sleep surgeon in Wollongong. His name is Professor Stuart Mackay. During that period, firsthand, I saw the problems that patients were facing. CPAP therapy, while very effective for some patients, isn't for everyone. And a lot of these patients were coming to our ENT department, our ENT clinics, asking for other solutions to their problem. One of the things I noticed during that time was a lot of the procedures that we do as ENTs for sleep apnea, while they can be effective, aren't always chosen by the patients because of their invasiveness. And in addition, some patients aren't actually indicated for them for various different reasons, and those reasons can be patient related or related to the type of obstructive sleep apnea that they have. So I saw firsthand this need for less invasive therapies as alternatives to CPAP therapy and invasive surgery, and had always wanted to develop a medical device. I was always interested in the intersection between engineering and medicine. Decided to come over to Johns Hopkins in the United States in midway through 2022, where I underwent a master's program at the Center for Bioengineering, Innovation and Design. And we did a formal needs finding process, and sleep kept coming up. We were doing it in ENT. We were seeing patients undergoing hypoglossal nerve stimulation and drug-induced sleep endoscopy and upper airway surgery. And this need kept jumping out at us. This time I was looking at it from a different lens. How can we develop a technology to serve the needs of patients who are going untreated? And so SomnAir was born from that inspiration. I was fortunate enough to meet a great team at Johns Hopkins and have the support of the Johns Hopkins Medical Institute and Johns Hopkins University ecosystem on the engineering and the clinical side. And we came up with an idea, and here we are 3 years later.
Wow, 3 years. Well, I think it's interesting. You and I met on the pitching circuit with our sleep technologies, and I love what you're doing with SomnAir, and I think your background's just incredible for a good spot, right? From creating and finding the need and really being a physician that's actually out there seeing those problems too as well. It makes it that much easier, I think, in a way to you feel the need of your patients and you kind of come up with a solution. But tell me, where did you get the idea to go into otolaryngology with being an ENT?
Yeah, so that goes back to medical school. When I was at medical school, I was randomly assigned to a head and neck surgery operating room list, and I had never really even thought about ENT or the head and neck as an area of interest until I stepped into that operating room. And what I observed was it was a very different surgery to what we do for sleep. It was a cancer surgery, but I got the opportunity to see the intricate anatomy that is in the head and neck, and fell in love with that field as a result of that. I think there is, and I'm biased, yes, but there is no other specialty which has such beautifully intricate anatomy that's interrelated to function in the way that ENT or otolaryngology head and neck surgery does. And then I was fortunate enough to be mentored by people like Professor Stuart Mackay and other very influential ENT surgeons who had an innovative bent to their work. Being Australian, there's a proud history of innovation in ENT. Companies like Cochlear, I come from Sydney, and so I loved the fact that it was this highly clinically challenging, academically interesting field, but also that really leveraged the role of technology. And by working in this field, I just love the fact that I can make such significant impact on people's lives.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'd love to get into where sleep comes from. I've had the joy of meeting of Dr. Stuart Mackay a few times, but it's cool to see how the small world comes together. And that's one thing I love about ENTs. I think the dedication and the passion is unique. You get a lot of options to be nerdy as you're going in there, like you said. That's functional and restorative for a lot of things. So with sleep patients, tell me why is the market of sleep growing so much? What's the damage of sleep apnea, and why, in your perspective, it feels like it's just been a growing market and industry?
Oh, absolutely. So look, first and foremost, it's a huge and highly voluminous problem. So there was a article published in The Lancet some years ago that estimated the epidemiology and the prevalence of sleep apnea around the world, and they estimated that there were 1 billion people around the world which suffer from the disease. That's astounding if you think about it. That's now 1 in 8 people. So in every room you're in, every cafe, every restaurant, every class that you're in, 1 out of 8, or every 8 people that are in there will develop or have obstructive sleep apnea. And it was always astounding to me that, when I saw firsthand all the limitations to the current treatments, that there hadn't been more innovation in the field. But that's an increasing trend now, because people are starting to become more aware of the damages of obstructive sleep apnea, particularly when it's poorly managed. And as a result, innovators are starting to move into the field because there's such an opportunity for high impact. Obstructive sleep apnea, it's a disease that's characterized by the upper airway collapsing repeatedly during sleep, and that leads to these episodes of the oxygen dropping, the airflow stopping, and if this is not treated and it's severe enough, there are so many consequences of that can affect patients' daily lives. Most notably, your blood pressure can chronically increase, and that dramatically increases the risk of stroke and heart attack. There's some excellent studies out there which demonstrate that those risks are 2 to 3 times higher than the average population. People have debilitating daytime symptoms as well because they don't have restorative sleep, and they're as a result of these repeated pauses in their breathing, they arouse all the time. Arousing meaning they slightly wake up, so they don't get restorative sleep, and they have debilitating daytime sleepiness. Some people will even crash their cars because they fall asleep at the wheel. People can't hold a job because they can't work. People aren't safe to work in factories where there's heavy machinery. And then it affects relationships as well, because a big part of obstructive sleep apnea is snoring. And snoring is socially problematic. There's a new entity that people talk about called bedroom divorce, where people have to move to other rooms, and it affects relationships. So I think that people are starting to catch on to the significant effects of obstructive sleep apnea, and that's a big reason why there's so much more innovation in the field.
Right. It's there's people with the CPAP machines is becoming super commonplace. Like you said, the divorce from the room with the snoring. But tell me about CPAPs, and why is it seem to be that it's in the media, it's in everyone's, I don't know how many, 1 out of 10, if not more, people's houses. What does it do, and why is it not hitting the mark?
Well, CPAP for the right person is an excellent option. So the way it works is that it uses positive airway pressure. So CPAP stands for continuous positive airway pressure, in order to splint open the airway during sleep. What that requires is that the patient wears a mask. And so there are a couple of different types of masks. Well, there's many, in fact. There's masks that cover the full face. There's masks that just cover the nose. And in the right person that can tolerate that, it's highly effective. And there are some patients that we see that would say to me, I'm never giving this thing up. It's amazing. It's changed my life. But there is just as many that suffer from claustrophobia with the mask, tolerance issues around dry mouth, dry nose, as well as some struggles with the portability of the systems and the bulk of the system. And so that was just as common a complaint that we would hear in the clinic, that yes, when I do wear this, if I can get through the night wearing it, I feel better. But man, I just don't want to do it. And so while CPAP's been great for some people, this has increasingly meant that people have sought other solutions. So full respect to the people that developed CPAP. I've met some of the original inventors of CPAP, and it's amazing technology in sleep, and it's amazing technology in other areas, critical care, etc. It's just that for some patients, it's just not quite right, and other therapies are required.
Right. So there's a CPAP is out there. You guys are also doing multiple procedures and types for sleep, but at some level, you had this itch to innovate. So tell me about that journey, and then ultimately let's get into SomnAir.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that as a physician and as someone who has an innovative bent, I was never really satisfied with the fact that so many patients who aren't tolerating that CPAP are either told you're not eligible for surgery, go back to using the CPAP, and they continue to struggle with it. Like looking backwards in medicine and thinking about the things that have been innovated to change the field, I just felt there was such a massive opportunity to develop new things that would be better tolerated by others. So SomnAir, the concept is that it's an oral appliance, similar to a dental alignment tray, which has a neurostimulation module embedded into it. So we're borrowing from the concept of neurostimulation that provides that electrical stimulation to a number of targets in the throat to improve the tone of the muscles in the throat, and therefore prevent that component of the airway from becoming floppy and collapsing. So the therapy delivers, we're still in development, but the vision is that it will deliver this stimulation therapy in sync with the patient's breath in to increase the tone of the muscles and prevent collapse. And the benefits of that are that it's non-invasive, it's less bulky than your mask, and it doesn't require surgical implantation.
Wow. No, I think it sounds exactly like what people want. Non-invasiveness, getting out of an old therapy and into something that hopefully works a lot better. Tell me about the journey, right? You said you went to Johns Hopkins for it was a master's degree into innovation. And how did that process look? And then how has this been tested, and what kind of work have you done leading up to this product?
Sure. Yeah. So we when we were rotating through the hospital in Johns Hopkins, we saw and listed many needs in many fields of ENT. Sleep kept coming to the fore because of the massive unmet need there. Once we had come up with this idea around being able to stimulate this novel target through this novel form factor, which was more tolerable, we said to ourselves, if this was to come to market and be available to patients, what are the things that we would need to do? And part of that is that we need clinical proof of concept. We need technical development. We need a commercialization plan. We need to be wary of regulatory considerations. And ultimately, we need to demonstrate to the market through evidence that this is going to be a viable therapy. So one of the first components of that journey was to test this at the benchtop, build some prototypes, and then translate that into a preclinical model, and then eventually into human studies. We were fortunate that at Johns Hopkins, our current clinical partners, Dr. Kevin Moats and Dr. Lou Pham, who have been mentored by a sleep giant, Dr. Alan Schwartz, were running a very an experiment that was almost exactly what we needed. They were putting patients under drug-induced sleep endoscopy, which is a procedure where patients with sleep apnea are provided some sedation, and then we use a camera that goes through the nose and looks at the airway to observe which parts of the airway are collapsing, and thereby recommend treatments. That gave us a model and an opportunity to provide the stimulation to this new target and then observe the effects on the airway, as well as observing the effects on how the airflow improves when we do provide the stimulation therapy. So very quickly, we were in the clinic and in the operating room with our partners, and with our prototypes that we had at that stage, we started to test things, and we did a lot of iterating on the technical side. There were some things that we needed to work out on the circuitry side as well as the electrode side. But eventually, once we had figured those things out and really refined our procedures, we were able to demonstrate that this therapy can open the airway and it can improve airflow in the right patient. So that was like a big de-risking moment for us. We really needed to address this novel biological hypothesis that we had, and that data has been pivotal in our traction to date. That's enabled us to move forward at SomnAir and move into the next phase, which is to take what is our research testing prototype and then developing it into a fully fledged design frozen minimum viable product that we can then undertake a clinical trial with.
That's a lot of work already done, and I imagine it's a relief to have some good success there. When you talked about patient diagnosis, I believe that's an important part. But tell me how yours works with choosing the right type of patient. And I think in the history of medical devices, the importance of giving the right device to the right patient has always been the number one and most important thing to having success on the outcome. So, what do you guys feel is the right diagnosis on those patients?
Yeah, sure. So our device is designed to stimulate a certain component of the airway. So in obstructive sleep apnea, if you think about the airway from an anatomical point of view, there are 3 or 4 main sites where the collapse can happen. The palate, the soft palate, what we call the lateral walls of the pharynx, or put simply, the side walls of the throat, the tongue, and then the epiglottis, which is the cartilage that sits above the voice box when you swallow. There is a proportion of patients where the tongue is the culprit, and those patients are really well treated by surgical therapies that address that. Hypoglossal nerve stimulation is an excellent example of that. Our therapy stimulates different anatomy, so we're able to improve the tone and the airflow in patients that have airway collapse of the level of the palate and the side walls of the throat. We don't specifically target the tongue, but that was a big unmet need that we had identified, because there were patients that were undergoing tongue therapies and not having optimum results as a result of that, because of the fact that some technologies out there couldn't adequately address those other components. So we think that we can be both a primary therapy or monotherapy for the patients with airway collapse at those sites, but also a potential adjunct to existing tongue-based therapies to provide combination therapy or multi-level therapy that makes a big impact on the severity of disease.
No, that's the large opportunity to grow into both of those. So with all these patients that you now have the right diagnosis, how many patients are experiencing the type of problems that you believe that SomnAir is going to be able to solve?
Yeah, so that's a great question. If you take the global prevalence of obstructive sleep apnea, it's estimated that there are 54 million Americans that have the disease. Now, a lot of that is underdiagnosed. So the actual patients getting therapy is growing as awareness increases. Of about 8 million patients that are currently using CPAP in the US, about 50% of those patients are struggling with non-adherence. And so we think that we can initially start there. And in particular, when thinking about the anatomical segmentation and those components of the airway that we think we can treat up to about 60% of the patients that are failing CPAP. Estimates suggest that between 40 and 50% of patients have tongue-based collapse. So as a monotherapy, we think that we can service all those patients that aren't suffering from tongue-based collapse.
Yeah, well, you've proved that you've got some activity that you're able to initiate that opens the airway. You have some technology developed. What does the rest of the journey look like? We have a lot of people on these that are listening that are coming out of PhDs or coming out of labs and wondering what that entrepreneurial journey could be, and then bringing things to market. Tell me what your roadmap is and what your what kind of challenges and risks do you have ahead of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are fully focused at this stage now that we've got our proof of concepts biological data on developing the technology to the level that we can submit to the FDA for clearance. So we're in a hard tech push. So we're developing the circuitry, the mechanical form factor. We have to take into consideration the ISOs and all these other regulatory standards. So we're partnering with a design firm, and we're starting to increase the size of our team on the technical side to be able to meet that challenge. Following that, we are hoping to conduct an early feasibility study in patients who have failed CPAP therapy as our first step towards regulatory clearance. And thereafter, we will complete a pivotal study, which we think can achieve FDA clearance. So we're hoping, all things going well, that the therapy can be on the market Q1 of 2028, and we can start marketing it to patients.
Wow, that's impressive and aggressive. It's a very powerful product, and you want to get it right. How do you also manage all of this entrepreneurship with your work as a physician? How has that balance been, and how do you see that in the future?
Well, right now I'm full-time in entrepreneurship, so I love the fact that I can sort of bridge both worlds there, be involved in the clinical side of things with our research studies, but also build a company at the same time. It's a challenge. It's very difficult to balance those things, but I've always liked a challenge, and I look forward to all of the challenges that are ahead of us. So at which point we can reach our milestones. But I would say to anyone who's interested in entrepreneurship, who's a PhD or who's an engineer or whatever you might be, what's really key is you need to love that type of work, and you need to love the challenge of addressing the unknown. And you really need to love the fact that you need to know multiple things about multiple different worlds: the clinical side, the scientific side, the technical side, the regulatory side. So it's a great career and it's a great endeavor for those that love to be involved in multidisciplinary teams and really push their understanding of the field and push their professional development by being involved in multiple disciplines.
I think that you got a great journey ahead of you. When, in my experience in building these companies and teams, finding the right people, it's one of the areas that I say is what multiplies the fastest on how things can get done well and at least take some of the stress off your own shoulders. How has that been with putting the right people around you, either through the organization, through Johns Hopkins and their assistants, or through these different groups that that SomnAir has been talking to? How have you been approaching your team building, and what has been some of the surprises there on finding the right people?
Yeah, look, we've been very fortunate that our original team that we started with continues to be very passionate about developing their technology and has excellent skills that are, fills the niches that we need to execute our goals. That lays a great foundation. What we have been focusing on to this point and going forward is selecting the right partners. So on that design development side, partnering with the right expertise from a design and engineering standpoint, as well as having the right clinical mentorship and clinical advisory, which, being at Johns Hopkins, is not too hard to find, given that it's such an amazing institution that's forever been at the forefront of science and technology. We're very focused on partnering with people with expertise that we may not have in-house currently, but we're also looking for excellent engineering talent and commercialization talent to help us push the company forward and eventually get it to the final milestone, which is market entry.
Yeah, with a lot of times with designing and implementing new things, a lot of times you can get new ideas and where maybe a platform technology could be translated. Have you had any of that sort of design creep or indication creep or clinical creep try to split your time, or do you have new ideas that you're thinking of that sort of want to invade your hardcore focus?
Yeah, that's always the challenge. So when you talk to people about the problem and you talk to people about the technology that we're developing, we hear a lot of great ideas that could be peripheral to the current indication or the current focus of the technology. We are really mission focused in that we want to develop a therapy for obstructive sleep apnea because we think that we can provide the highest value to the clinical field by doing that. So while we have been at risk of being distracted, we try and always come back to our core mission to keep us on track. That said, I'm always coming up with ideas, so they all go in the notebook. And I think from a company standpoint, once we can prove out this concept, then we can begin to expand into to address some of the other challenges that exist in the field, and that is the one you previously mentioned around making sure that you're diagnosing, selecting the right patient for different therapies, optimizing the therapy itself, but also there's the adherence and compliance side to the device. And so one of our visions is to develop a platform whereby clinicians as well as patients can track both their own health outcomes as well as the health outcomes of their patients. And that will encourage the patients to continue to use the device, and will provide data to the clinicians so that they can be rest assured that the patient's outcomes are continuing to be good.
Well, I think that's a brilliant thing, especially as we move to a tech forward, internet connected of things. Has there been any work or concepts into AI, as is always the buzzword, but really translating and changing our worlds?
Yeah, look, I think we've looked at the role of AI, and I think that on that software side, in terms of the platform that will enable patients to track their use and the clinicians to track their health outcomes, I think that as AI becomes more and more developed and becomes more sophisticated, then certainly we can incorporate some of those technologies to make that even more streamlined for the doctor and even more streamlined for the patient. So a closed loop system, if you will, that can assist patients and assist doctors with making recommendations based on the analysis of the algorithm. But again, that's something on the horizon that we're keenly keeping an eye on, but currently focused mostly on the therapeutic intent of the device.
So, the journey getting to where you're at with clinical, with finding all the right people. Now, the bigger question comes to is now you need money, right? It's not all built on dreams, and every clinical reality has a high fee. We have patients and hospitals and wonderful people along the way that need to be paid, and engineering. So the journey that I met you on was in the pitching world. But tell me a little bit about your experience with finding investors, pitching, and sort of what's it been like, and what kind of challenges have you learned, and how have you grown through that?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. I mean, I've traveled pretty much to every state in the United States at this point and internationally to pitch, and I love doing it. And the reason I love doing it is because I love sharing our vision. I think we've been to pitch competitions, we've been to conferences where we've pitched and talked about our technology, and we've been through incubators and accelerators. And what's great about that circuit has been that we've been able to get our name out there and our vision out there, and then really start to connect with investors and find alignment. And we've found that a lot of the people who have been willing to support us have this personal connection to obstructive sleep apnea, which has been key because it's so common. Almost everyone we talk to says, "Oh, my brother or my cousin or my dad has obstructive sleep apnea." And so that spurs interest and has really translated into people being very passionate about and willing to hear more and being, willing to advance the investment conversation. It's a challenging thing because, and this is for the budding entrepreneurs out there, is that it's not just selling your vision, but you have to sell that you have the right team that can execute, and you have the right understanding of the market, and you've done your due diligence, not just on the clinical and technical side, but on all of those hurdles that are required to get a technology to market, the regulatory ones, reimbursement, all those sorts of things. So I think the best advice I can give to people around talking to the investment world is to make sure that you understand all of those elements of the commercialization component and are able to articulate that nicely. But always come back down to your core mission and be willing to share, why. Why do you do this? And for me, that's not so difficult because of the clinical exposure I've had to the problem. So highlighting those sorts of things is very helpful for for, getting people interested and advancing those conversations.
What would you say? How many times have you had to tell your story, and how many no's have you had at the same time, especially when you're specifically asking for investment? And then I say that just so that we can make people realize that it could take a lot of times, right?
Oh yeah, it takes yes, absolutely, it takes a long time. Oh, we've had more no's than we've had yeses, and I think that's normal. I get told that a lot by successful entrepreneurs, people who've exited companies, etc. And every time you get a no, it's just a matter of saying like why and what can we improve on, and then the next pitch becomes better. I think it's just a matter of persistence, and it's a matter of refining a story, and it's a matter of having the right data to present, and then presenting it in a way that is understandable to people of different backgrounds. Not everyone's a doc, not everyone's a scientist, not everyone is an engineer. So you have to be able to communicate in a way that people connect with and are able to understand at the level that they're used to. But also you have to learn to talk their language because they come from some other background, whether they're a finance person or they're a previous scientists or an engineer. It's a matter of like knowing your audience and communicating effectively so that you can get that message across.
It's great advice and a good place to end. Is there any final things that you want to share? Some final advice that you'd give out there to different physicians, anybody engineering in the medical space?
Yeah, look, stick with it. It's not easy. It's difficult, and I'm not at the end of the journey. But day to day, you get these little rewards that help you push on. So look to those little things, those little rewards, and then bring yourself back to the impact piece. Because at the end of the day, you don't build a company to not make a difference. It's a big endeavor. It takes up a lot of time. There's a lot of sacrifices that are made, and I've found it in my work and my journey that really being obsessed with that problem and being tied to the mission is very important. So that's the final piece of advice I would give is follow your dreams. And if you'd like to hear more about SomnAir, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is somnairsleep.com. We have a friendly team and we'd love to have a chat.
Yeah, that'll be on our website along with the transcript of this conversation. But no, I love that advice. Take the little pieces and celebrate a little bit, a little bit at a time to get you through the days. I think there's an old saying that, how do you eat a whale? It's one bite at a time. And I think and I don't know who quoted that. I'm pretty sure it's a children's book, but at this point, I appreciate everything, Anders, and I wish you amazing luck. And I can't wait to see SomnAir really impact lives and change people out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for your time. All the best.
Yeah, we'll see you soon around one of the 50 states, maybe internationally next.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Bye, everybody.
All right.